One of the developmental milestones, also known as successfully getting through high school, can be a really challenging time in any young person's life, filled with angst, hormone surges, changing bodies, peer pressure, and like all of us, regardless of age, the need and desire for human connection and community. Connection and community are often tied to future success, or if not full-on success, then to getting through high school with fewer emotional roller coaster moments. Students who are coping with any issue that creates shame, usually kept as a secret from others, often build a wall of self-protection, preventing their engagement with the school community for fear of rejection, being found out, or being pitied. They run the risk of losing interest in things, feeling alone, and a whole host of many other feelings that can be damaging when they have no place to put those feelings. Shame is the result of having a secret that no one can know. And isolation results from being alone with that secret, believing that no one will understand you, accept you, or can even imagine your circumstances. That wall of self-protection is built for a good reason, but taking it down within a safe and nurturing environment builds a better reason, a sturdy self-confidence and resilience that can forever be an asset for that isolated student. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, a podcast featuring interviews with nonprofit and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. My hope is that you love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, or donate. Feel free to pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and remember to send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. Transforming shame and stigma into hope and dignity is the mission and mantra of an incredible organization called POPs the Club. 2.7 million children in the U.S. have an incarcerated parent, and 1 out of 14 have an incarcerated parent or loved one. POPs the Club is based on the school club model and serves to support students whose parents or loved ones are in prison or jail. POPs the Club is designed to nourish and empower students through creative expression, emotional support, and the development of community. POPs the Club fosters a sense of a shared experience among club members that encourages confidence and develops skills to educate the broader community through the POPs publishing program. 4 key areas are dignity, empowerment, community, and voice. Each of these areas are connected to self-respect, pride, leadership, development, nurturing connections, and resilience that encourage change in self and the world. POPs the Club operates in 19 schools in 5 states, 8 clubs right here in the Los Angeles area, and pilot clubs in Pennsylvania, Maryland, the Atlanta area, and New York City. I am so very proud to introduce co-founder and executive director Amy Friedman, Sonia Fay, Director of Programs and Operations, and Ariel Harris, Associate Director of Programs. They're also known as some of the official chain breakers. So let's get started. Welcome, Amy, Ariel, and Sonia. I'd like to start really opening the podcast with initially sharing your passion for POPs the Club.
Thanks for having us, Laura. This is Amy. I'll start because I'm the executive director, but also the founder. And I think Ariel and Sonia will be able to give some deep understanding of the organization as it exists today. But just to give a little background on where the Passion Project began is I was at one time married to a man who was in prison. Mm-hmm. I met him when he was in prison. I married him when he was in prison, and I raised his daughters. This is many years ago, more years than I like to admit. Although he and I eventually divorced after 7 years of marriage, the girls have remained my girls. They were quite young when they first started living with me. And one of the things I quickly learned, partially as a result of becoming a prisoner's wife, mostly because of watching and dealing with them, was the very particular pain that is associated with loving somebody who is in prison. Missing that person, in addition to all the difficulties around visiting and so on and so forth, there is also stigma attached. And my girls had been stigmatized from the time their father went to prison and had absorbed the concept that they needed to keep this secret. I have a strong belief that we are only as sick as our secrets. It was heart-wrenching to me to watch them. I am, by training and background and experience, a writer. I'm a memoir and personal essay writer and writing teacher, and I believe in speaking our truths. And as much as I would try to encourage my girls to speak their truths and that they had nothing to be ashamed of, it was late for that message to get through. And I saw the struggles that ensued from that. So my older daughter dropped out of school. They've both had, throughout their lives, they're adults now, and they've had all kinds of mental health and physical health problems. They've continued in many ways to be very secretive and kind of shamed by something for which they have no reason to be shamed. So cut to many, many years later, after our divorce, I remarried a man who's a high school teacher. And for years, I would go into his classrooms to work with kids on personal essay and memoir. And he and I started talking about, is there something we could do for all these kids? You mentioned a statistic I'm just going to correct a little bit, which is the 1 in 14 number. 1 in 14 children in the United States has a parent who is or has been incarcerated. But we work also with kids with siblings and other loved ones. The number is huge. And what that means is that just about every single classroom in America will have one or many more of those students, and people don't know it because it's secret. Basically, 8 years ago, exactly, in 2013, we had this notion of starting a club in the school where he was then teaching, Venice High School. And we presented a proposal modeled after the very first club in the United States for gay students that was founded by a man in Massachusetts and was launched at one school and eventually became the Gay Straight Alliance. We found him, we got his proposal, we cribbed it, and we presented it to the principal at Venice High School, who said yes immediately, partly because she had had personal experience with a loved one who was incarcerated. So there are a couple rules in POPs. One is nobody has to say why they're there. Nobody gets sent, and there must be food. But the first girl who walked into the room picked up her peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She was a 10th grader. A couple minutes later, the second girl walked in the room, and they looked at each other astonished. They had been friends since they were in kindergarten, close friends, go to each other's houses kind of friends, share secrets about boyfriends kind of friends. What they didn't know was that each of them had a father who was incarcerated and who had been incarcerated since they were little girls. When they realized this secret that they shared, and they kind of threw their arms around each other, and I saw that, I turned to Dennis and I said, we're going to launch a 501c3 and we're going to bring this to every school in the country. Having no idea what I was talking about. As Sonia and Ariel will attest, I'm still on a steep learning curve.
That first experience that you witnessed was so incredible to watch what you were able to bring together for these two young women that I am sure altered their lives forever in a positive way. And I imagine gave you and your husband the depth of understanding of how you knew in your gut this was important, but to see it come to life for you in that moment must have been, I mean, I have goosebumps just imagining that moment for you and for them.
Yeah, you're right. We know what we're doing matters. But yeah, it was transformational.
I like that word a lot. Ariel and Sonia, share a bit about your passion.
I'm Ariel. I'm now as you mentioned earlier, the Associate Program Director. I started with POPs probably about 5.5 years ago. I was introduced to this organization actually from my old boss. She thought that I would be a perfect fit because I have a similar background to the students. Well, my parents never went to prison, but they were definitely arrested a lot. And I was there to see it. And I never really talked about it. I ended up emancipating myself when I was 16 and moved out to LA. One day I was having a heart-to-heart with my old boss, and she said, oh my gosh, you have to meet Amy. She's, part of this wonderful organization called POPs. And I met Amy, and my old boss Mel was absolutely correct, and I started just helping with social media, with their social media, and then I never left, and here I am. And for me, it's just, well, I never had pops as a high school student. I had teachers who really helped push me along and who really listened to what I was going through and helped me emancipate myself, actually. It was in high school, it was in the schools where I found that safe space. And so when I found out about POPs, I was thrilled, and I still am. And now I get to be the person who, runs our programming, which is what directly provides that safe space for the students to talk about, like I had in my teachers. And so it's really cool to see, and I've grown really close to some of the students, and especially now being here for 5 years, I've seen students start as freshmen who are now in college, and it's really awesome to see them just start realizing and understanding that there's power in your story, and there's always space to grow, and there's no reason to feel ashamed.
And for someone to really believe in you, believe that you have potential. And I think that from your own experience of teachers who pushed you along, had you not had that, it may have been, very different. And so what Pops the Club really does is provides that environment, and there are enough people that someone's going to find someone to connect with, whether a fellow student, one of the instructors, other teachers who support it in the environment. Is incredible. It's really beautiful. And now yours is sort of a legacy of coming back in some way, adding on to what you had, but in a more formalized way, which is really terrific.
Yeah, and it's really great to have that perspective, because whenever I start thinking about implementing something within the program, I go back to how did I feel when I was in high school?
It's such a good model because it's really an empathic frame. How did I feel? What would I have liked? What didn't I get? What did I get that worked? Yeah, it's really terrific. Thank you, Ariel. Sonia, welcome.
Thank you. I started with POPs as a volunteer. I learned about POPs when I took a writing class with Amy. And at the end of the class, she shared about this organization that she had started. I had been volunteering at my kids' schools. I have two teenage boys.
Two teenage boys and a dog. It's okay. This is life on Zoom and podcasting. I love it. It makes it real. The dog had something very important to say.
She really did. She needs to let me know that there's somebody close by. I have two teenage boys and stayed home when they were younger. I wanted to still, do things and be active, right? So I got involved in their schools and actually ended up running our local elementary school art program. And I started with POPs, helping write some of the curriculum and volunteering in one of the clubs, in one of our local clubs at our local high school. And the very first day that I walked into a club meeting, I knew I was done. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm here. Yeah, it was that compelling. What I love about the format, which is really, really simple, especially having two teenagers, I really understand this. It's pretty rare that they actually get an opportunity to have this kind of autonomy, speak for themselves, be heard, have their voice and thoughts listened to. And that was really striking to me. I think it's one of the best things about the club environment is that it's for the students, by the students. They make all the important choices and they tell us what they care about. And we're there really just to hold the space, and keep it safe and sacred.
Thank you, Sonia. I want to capitalize on one word that you said. We minimize the importance of teens' voices, and you've created a space that not only gives them opportunity to be acknowledged, the latitude to create that voice and space within boundaries and within a construct, but they have tremendous buy-in because they're making these decisions respectful of their emerging adulthood, young adulthood. I think it's tremendous what you all have done. If I had my vote, it would be in every single high school, like the GSA. I was around in those early days in Massachusetts, and I loved it for that reason, because you have to find space where you can be yourself, to eliminate the concept of secrecy and embrace the concept of you're okay, you've got potential, you have a voice, and we want to hear you.
One of the things, and this kind of grew out of obviously my being a writer, my husband's also a writer. So we emphasized right from the beginning the importance of writing. He and I had worked together for years through a program called Pen in the Classroom that published a book every year of the students who were part of that program. And so we decided we were going to publish a POPs anthology every year. And that original concept has grown and been enhanced by the many volunteers and staff members and kids who've become part of this. Just this year, well, just 2020, we now have a national distributor. The whole idea of the book, there are two ideas. Making art, so the anthologies contain poetry and essays and haikus and drawings and paintings and photographs that the students have created through the clubs, using to some degree this curriculum that Sonia was such an important part of. Partly it's that the creative process itself is healing, but also one of the things, and this kind of grew directly out of my daughters, one of the things I know is how much these kids have to teach everyone. And you said this, Laura, how much their voices need to be heard. And so not only their healing, but our whole nation's healing. We lock up way too many people. We lock up way too many Black and brown and poor people. Then we marginalize those voices. And so part of what the anthology is about is to celebrate and showcase those voices.
And now you're on the national scene. And I love that even though writing is the base, that you leave space for students who have other forms of expression or can learn about writing, different kinds of writing. I know in high school, an essay might have made me feel intimidated. So writing a haiku or doing a little bit of prose or drawing or doing some kind of collage or a photograph might have been an expression that I would have taken on as a safer until I felt okay to be a little more vulnerable or to try something out. Tell me, I'd love to know about the name, and I'd love to know about the tagline, Official Chain Breakers, both of which I think are wonderful. So share with me a little bit about that.
Well, the name was actually selected by the first cohort of kids at Venice. I was filing for the 501c3 and I needed a name. So I put it out to them and they started throwing ideas out. And this brother and sister, they came to Pops because their father had been arrested. They were in the car when he was arrested. It was so traumatizing.
For sure.
And their whole family was really in pain. So he shouted out, well, there has to be pain in the name. And somebody else shouted, I don't remember who, pain of the prison system. And then they started talking about but the thing about the room where they were sitting and talking and eating and making art was not painful. And so they wanted it to sound kind of lighter and happier, represent the lightness and the happiness that is the club. So that was the name that we put on the papers. And, there's been conversation over the years about the possibility of a name change, but it's hard to move away from a name that is born in the beginning. POPS stands for Pain of the Prison System.
But I like that legacy piece because it is where kids came from, and what they're moving to is Pops is sort of a light, cheerful, fun, just in terms of the name itself versus what it stands for, but both have a place in that room, in that club.
And likewise, Chainbreakers was a kid that I could be wrong about this, but I believe it was this young man who's working with us. We've had many designs, many iterations of a Pops t-shirt. But the very first one, he was doing the design. I think it was him. They're all so creative and smart. And if you just leave them alone to come up with things, it always works.
It doesn't. And it's amazing. I like official chain breakers because they are pushing forward in spite of their pain and producing amazing things and growing in the process of that production. Could any of you, this is really open to any of you, share what have you seen has been the impact on some of the students who have come into the program and left, or who've maybe come in and are still in the program?
I think you should tell the story of Jennifer, Sonia, because you were witness to that one.
Yeah, I can do that. We had a student, I think I came in her 10th or 11th grade year. I can't remember. Really amazing writer, really deep writer who really wanted to share, was ready, was open. And sometimes that takes some time. She came in, this was in her senior year, and she came in with like an entourage, like she had a little posse with her. And, one of the things in our club was, you don't have to participate, but you do need to be respectful of other people when they're sharing, right? Because it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to share your story. So you don't have to talk. But if you're going to come and be in the space, then, you definitely want to hold that space for the people who are sharing. She was kind of having a side conversation with the friends that couple friends that she had come in with, and she just wasn't really in it. And, the teacher sponsor basically said to her, please, it's important that, you be respectful. If you can't do that, then you'll have to leave, but you're welcome to come back. She was like, well, if I leave, I'm not going to come back. And he said, look, if you're not going to be respectful, I do need you to leave, but you're always welcome back. And she left. And we didn't see her again until the last day of the semester, of her graduating year. And she came in and participated again. And I think, had enough time to sort of cool down. It's really hard when you make a stand like that, to then back off of it. I think that's a testament to how important the club was and the relationships were, that even though it was hard for her to save face and come back in that last day, but more important, she had some kind of closure and was able to see everybody again before she left. And she continues now to come back and be a speaker. She's kept in touch with the program. So she's honestly one of our most involved grads.
The story is so telling in so many ways. It sounds to me as if this young woman was able to internalize the boundary. You're welcome back at any time. And this is the space we hold for everyone. You're part of an everyone, and you need to respect when people are vulnerable, just like they would respect you. Now she's participating as a graduate, which is incredible.
Yeah, and it's not always beautiful and perfect. And I think that's actually another part of what's so special about the environment, is that we're not always our best selves, and it's okay. We still love you. You've been gone for a couple of months, but the only thing that happens when you come back is we say we missed you.
I think that's true acceptance with a boundary. We're not going to, certain behavior can't be, because everybody's allowed to be here. But acceptance is, we have bad days. We take a stand because we had built a wall and we didn't know how to take it down. And I think having the opportunity to do a redo in a way that is respectful is a fantastic lesson.
Yeah, and the boundary is as much an act of love as the welcoming back part.
Right. And it's a testament to your program that this, and I'm assuming because you have an intern, other students have come back and wanted to be part of it. They want to keep it going in some capacity in their lives. So it has that depth of meaning and did a lot for them. It's so important to be connected to something that have an opportunity for repair in whatever that is. Can you share with me what a typical club meeting is like? I know there's food, which I think is brilliant, by the way. You have to feed people. You have to feed young people for sure.
In addition to the clubs in Los Angeles, we have quite a growing presence in Georgia. I was speaking to one of the sponsors the other day who told me this story. Ariel and that young man and his students participated a week or so ago in a Zoom interview with a reporter. And one of the girls in that group had said something so powerful. She said, "My father did a bad thing, but he is not a bad man, and I love him." And I'd been quoting her in other interviews because it was a nutshell description of so many of these kids' experiences. So I found out she is 12 years old, which I didn't realize. She was so young. And he told me that she had just written to him and told him that she had been suicidal before Pops and him, and that he had given her a person she could talk to, an adult she could talk to, and her friends in Pops had given her a place to be. That's one. The other one, just really quickly, because of this idea of the importance of voice and the celebration of them. Many years ago, there was a young man who was in Pops. He struggled with language, and it took him a long time to write something, but he wrote something one day and he got up in front of the room and he shared it. And it was such a big moment. You could just see it. A couple years later, he graduated. My husband and I got a call from him one day, and he asked us if we could meet for coffee. And we went out with him for coffee, and he started telling us a story. He had a favor to ask us. He started telling us a story of that he had been homeless for a period of time. He had been living out of his car. He had since then gotten a job, was in an apartment, had a girlfriend. Things were going well. But during the period of time when he was homeless, his car had been broken into and everything he owned was taken. And my husband and I were kind of looking at each other, waiting to hear that what he wanted was maybe to borrow some money or a bed or, anything. And he sort of looked really shy and he said, "Well, that day in Pops when I finally read my story, that was a really important moment for me. And they took my Pops book, and I was wondering if it would be possible for me to get another copy."
Okay, that's the best story I've ever heard. I love the other ones too. You changed this kid's life in a moment of pure acceptance for exactly who he is, what he went through. I could cry hearing all of these stories, and that in particular. What is a typical day in a school day and when you have the club? And then obviously, what have you done during COVID when school hasn't met?
I'm going to jump in and then I'm going to make them talk. In some ways, there's nothing typical because every school, every team of leaders, every student body is different, except there's one common denominator that we've all learned from listening to people, and the similarity is it's a safe space, as Sonia was describing.
It really depends on how the students are feeling on that day. Sometimes they come in, they want to either create a piece of art or write. Sometimes they just want to come in and hang out with each other. And in terms of curriculum, we have a curriculum. It's not prescriptive. There are 3 components to that curriculum. We have a group of art exercises, and then there's the writing portion of the curriculum, which again is a number of different types of exercises. They're really designed, I think, to not be so formal that it feels like another class in school. And then there's a mindfulness piece, which is the piece that I worked on, and also the one that's the newest. And I worked on them with another amazing visual artist and mindfulness instructor, Kate Savage. One of the things that I thought about when first, approaching the mindfulness piece was, how do you really begin to recognize that you have agency in how you feel, starting with how you breathe.
I'm a huge believer in mindfulness in a whole host of arenas. And I think just to capitalize on what Ariel said is that you're walking into a space where people automatically have a sense of empathy for what you're going through or have been through. I actually do mindfulness for 5 minutes in each of my classes and my reason for that is I want to bring everybody in the same space together at the same time, because everybody has a whole world out there of noise and interference. I wish I had learned that in high school. Boy, did I need that.
We have tried our best to switch over to an online platform. And, we do have our core group of students who continue to join each week. It's difficult. A lot of students can't join for so many reasons. And also Zoom fatigue is a real thing. So we are having online meetings. And we also started sending out text messages just to do little check-ins with everybody where they're not expected to give anything back. They don't have to show up for anything. They're just getting a little reminder on their phone that they have POPs as a resource. And I'll send little mindfulness tips and tricks and maybe some articles, stuff about the anthology. And then we're also meeting with the students online once a week as well.
What's great is that you're still engaging them. And as you said, you're not expecting anything back. If you get something back, that's great. But it really is just sharing that you're available, you're there, you're not going away. We will all get back together. It's just been a very long time.
Yeah, and we realize that sometimes home environments aren't a very safe space. And POPs is meant to be that safe space. We have some students who will join POPs meetings, but they'll keep their camera off and their mics off, and maybe they'll chat to me, hey, can you share this with the group? Or chat to whoever is leading the club. And then sometimes they just don't feel comfortable joining at all, which is totally fine, which is where the texting piece came in.
I think that's the element of deep caring that you offer, that you're out of sight, but you're definitely not out of mind. As you all know, with my podcast, I always have a round of quick and gutsy questions. So if you're okay, I'm going to start with my first one. If you can't respond with the words money or funding or donation, what is at the top of your wish list for Pops the Club?
I would say greater awareness. I want more people to know that we exist, that this program is available.
That's the purpose of this podcast. So that's my hope too. That
Thank you, by the way.
That we can just spread it. I mean, it's really my goal, having worked in the nonprofit sector for so long. It's such a need for a program like yours and others that just, they need people to know about it.
That was mainly going to be my answer too, but connected to that is one of the things we didn't mention was we have a guest speakers portion. There are probably a lot of people listening who have some area of expertise that they could offer there.
I love that. So not just awareness of people to know about the program and get involved, but really if you have an area of expertise, absolutely put your name in the hat and participate in that way. What a great opportunity for folks who then either may speak once or maybe get into a regular volunteer position, which would be wonderful. Ariel, what about you?
I was just going to say safety. And I mean that mostly for the students. I want them to feel safe discussing what they're feeling. And I want that to just keep growing. I want the stigma surrounding incarceration to just go, really, ideally, to just go away.
It's a beautiful, beautiful wish, because regardless of what a student is experiencing, if they can feel safe to share it in a safe space, they can deal with it and manage it. So if you were to think of a song that describes Pops the Club, what would it be?
It's the song that I always want the kids to play at our book launches. They always tell me that I'm being too corny. Stand by Me.
Oh, I love that. You can be corny. It's a safe space here. Be corny. I love that song. Brings me to tears all the time.
I would say the song Happy. Very corny. I know.
No, I still love it too. That's a great one because it is part of your wish.
We have a book launch every year. And in fact, we're going to be having a virtual book launch on March 6th. A year plus ago, when we had our book launch for our last book, there are two kids who are now grads of the program, but they're singers and they play ukulele and sing. And so I asked them what they were going to sing, and they said, well, we're still figuring it out. And I said, do you know Stand By Me? And they rolled their eyes at me and they said, Well, yeah, but I mean, it's kind of old fashioned and corny. These are two African American kids. They came, they did a piece, I can't remember what they opened with, but then they were doing their closing piece and they start playing and they played Country Roads.
Okay, talk about passe. Okay, that's pretty funny. Maybe one day you'll get someone to do Stand By Me. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. That'll be my wish for you guys. What makes Pops the Club gutsy? It is gutsy.
Talking about incarceration out loud.
Talking out loud about something that I think can carry a lot of shame and really replacing that shame with dignity and respect and community. Beautiful.
I was going to say basically exactly what Amy just said. You know, it's talking about something that's stigmatized that shouldn't be so stigmatized. We want to get past the feeling uncomfortable and we just want to, you know, spread awareness and end the stigma. So
first, I feel like there are these stages that happen. You know, the first thing is that you talk about it. You feel okay to talk about it. But the next stage is that you're not apologizing for it. And I think that is gutsy, to just be able to, you know, speak that truth and not only not feel stigmatized, but also not feel like you have to answer for it. That really what you're sharing is your story and your truth, not an explanation, not a, you know, a justification.
What is something that outsiders or maybe even insiders don't know about Pops the Club that you haven't already shared?
I think that maybe a lot of people don't know how prevalent this is, this experience. And also that there's no one way that a Pops kid looks like. The breadth and depth of this experience is really far and wide. And I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just maybe in these types of schools or in this neighborhood. And once you start, you realize that that's just not true. It's everywhere.
I think it's not only so true, you've seen it, you've experienced it, and people should know. And it can be hidden because of the stigma, but it actually exists everywhere.
Yeah, and that's not to say that certain communities aren't disproportionately affected. I also think it's just really important to understand that this has become a universal experience in a lot of ways.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about Pops the Club, who would it be?
Somebody that it meant something to.
I want to take this opportunity to ask Jamie Foxx to call us.
I have one too. I have a dream person. Mine is a rapper. He's from Inglewood, and he used to be a Spanish teacher at Inglewood High School. And his name is D Smoke. He is so amazing. Oh my gosh, he's so amazing. And he just really gets it. And his music is so powerful, and he's just genius. And he's impacted, and he's very open about his story. And he actually just found recent success on a show and then just kind of blew up. And oh my gosh, he's so amazing. But I would love for him to be a part of Pops because he has been in the school system. He grew up in Inglewood. He has been impacted by incarceration, and he just gets everything about Pops. And I'm kind of obsessed with him. So I would selfishly like to have him. Yeah.
Well, D Smoke, if you're out there, and I'm gonna include them in a tweet and a hashtag and, you know, do a little of my own annoying, and we'll see what happens. Would be amazing. How should those celebrities reach you? How can people find you?
Our website is Pops, P-O-P-S, Clubs, CLUBS.org. And email is info@popsclubs.org. And we're pretty quick about responding.
Particularly if you're Jamie Foxx or D Smoke. Really quick. Or anything. I'm teasing.
Unless, Ariel, do you want to give your personal email for D Smoke?
That's great. You guys are amazing. Before we close out, and I thank you, is there anything else you want listeners or you want me to know? I'd love to share any last comments or thoughts that you have about this amazing program that Amy, you have founded and now directing, and Ariel, Sonia, and a whole host of other people have been engaged and involved in.
I would encourage people to check out our anthology so they can hear the words straight from the students. We just released our Dreamcatchers anthology, and you can get it on Amazon or on our Out of the Woods Press.
A little shout out to our angel donor, Madge Woods, who is funding a beautiful, amazing campaign. So that's outofthewoodspress.com.
That's great. Really great. I encourage everyone to get a copy. So I just want to take a moment and thank you, Amy, Ariel, and Sonia, for this fun, amazing, interesting, deep, important conversation about the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to take a moment and actually dedicate this podcast to all the current and former Pops the Club members who have not only changed their own lives, but have changed others, including my hope, any listeners, because it certainly has impacted me personally from hearing what you've shared. And I have to say I cheated. I went on your website. I watched all the videos. I really loved it. And I'm purchasing an anthology. So I'd like to do a quick plug for Pops the Club. They are doing an evening on March 6th at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's an evening with Dreamcatchers, and it's a fundraiser. And you can take a look at onlocationlive.com/pops. That's onlocationlive.com/pops. And it's an evening of music, poetry, dance, and stories with imaginative performance from Dreamcatchers, Pops the Club's 7th anthology, hosted by Robbie Pollack, artist, writer, musician, improv master, and manager of PEN, America's Prison Writing Program. Proceeds from the ticket sales will support Pop's continued work creating a safe and empowering community for youth impacted by the prison system. The event will include a silent auction featuring artwork by club members and Pop's teaching artists, offering you an opportunity to show support by purchasing a piece of this unique artwork. I know I'm going to attend, and I'm going to check out the silent auction. So please consider attending this event, making a donation, or making a purchase. Thank you so much, and we're so excited to support Pops the Club through this event and through this podcast. Thank you. Our blog of these small and gutsy nonprofits and small social impact organizations can be found in the organizational stories section of the Intrinsic Group website, so that we can continue to link clients, volunteers, future employees, and donors to the small but mighty network. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the small and gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their very impactful work. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, a management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and ensure their narrative is aligned with their culture. The volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, Pavel Franson, and my graphic designer, Nate Addy. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website, and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring Small and Gutsy to keep it going, please reach out to me at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. I'm Laura, and thanks for listening.